So, um, most of you guys probably know me, but for those who don't, my name's Jesse Jones, and I'm a professional animator. I've been animating for about 6 years now on TV commercials, some movies, um, and a lot of like personal projects and stuff. But I've been drawing and animating since I was a kid, making like flip books and stuff. But yeah. So I just wanted to share some of my knowledge. I've always loved like flash animation ever since watching like the old Joe cartoons like back in the day. I learned flash in high school, and the first time I learned how to do a motion tween, it was freaking awesome. So I've been using flash for about 15 years now. So I just wanted to go over some tips and techniques and stuff that I've kind of learned over the years. So yeah, let's get started. So I figured the best way to just show how I animate is just to animate something. Duh. So this is just the process I usually work in. So when I open up Flash, first off, I'll change the settings to 1920 by 1080, and I'll change the background color to like a neutral tone. So that way, if I'm filling a character in with white or anything, I'll be able to tell. I don't always though, and I think for this stream we can leave it as white, just so you guys can see what I'm doing. So, when I'm roughing out an animation, usually I'll use the pencil tool, and I'll set it to ink, because I find the brush to be kind of crappy, honestly. Like when you draw with the brush in Flash, it just does really horrible things to the line and it looks terrible. So I'll just use the pencil tool and I'll rough it out just like that. You know, get your character all roughed in. So I'll start with the pencil tool and just roughing in a generic character like so. Then, you know, I'll just go on animating it, turning on the onion skin so I can see my frames before. But something that I learned to do on the last project I was working on is not to actually use the onion skin, and it's more akin to how the traditional Disney animators worked, is they would just flip pages. So I'm flipping from a blank keyframe to a regular keyframe and just noticing, like, because I want him to anticipate, so he's gonna look surprised, so I want him to anticipate down. So let's see, his nose is gonna go down like that probably. Maybe that's too much. But yeah, flipping back and forth kind of makes it, or it forces your brain to think more about the direction the drawings are taking place and the direction the forces are moving in. And I've actually come to really like this technique, animating this way instead of the onion skin, because it feels like less of a crutch, I guess. You know, it feels more like animating on paper. So even though his head's going down, his hair is going to be dragging behind a little bit. So have his hair going up like that. His mouth off to the side. So, Tropy is asking, what's a motion tween? So a motion tween is Flash taking an image or a symbol and animating it for you. I guess the best way to show you is just to show you something. So if I were to draw a face like so. And if I were to go down in my timeline where my face is, and I right-click the timeline and say create classic tween, we want to create a classic tween, not a shape or a motion tween. Classic tween is just the tween that Flash has had for a long time. And it's the easiest to use. So create classic tween. You'll see that your layer turns purple and has dotted lines. And if we set a keyframe by pressing F6 on frame 15, we have another keyframe and an arrow in between. So if I go on my keyframe on frame 15 and move the smiley face over, you'll see on 1, the smiley face is right here. On frame 15, the smiley face is over here. And since we have a motion tween on this symbol, Flash moves it. So it's just a way for to animate drawings really easily. And a lot of times, like especially on TV shows, that's how a lot of animation is done with motion tweens. So if I go to my website, I can show you a project that I worked on that has this kind of motion tween style to it. Let's see. Hopefully it won't be too laggy. Let's see. So Hoops and Yo-Yo is one example. So they just have like the head artwork and the nose artwork and the pupil artwork. And they just use the computer to move these pieces of artwork around. So they're not actually drawing any keyframes. Instead of me taking this circle guy and drawing this in between, this in between, and this in between, the motion tween just allows it to go from one to the other. And it's probably the first thing, or it's probably the second thing you should learn to do in Flash. First thing you should learn to do in Flash is to animate frame by frame. Because honestly, motion tweens are pretty lazy. And if you learn how to animate with motion tweens before animating traditionally, you're not going to learn as many techniques, and it's not going to look as good. And you can fall into the trap of getting really lazy with your animation, which is not good. Animation takes a lot of work. We should not be lazy about it. We should try and, do the best we can. And every time we finish a project, we should try to improve upon the last one that we did. Oh yeah, I worked on the Hoops and Yo-Yo Halloween special on Hallmark Channel. It was just for one project. I didn't do the animated cards or anything like that. But one person on the Flash Holes Facebook group was asking, when should you use a motion tween and when should you just do traditional frame-by-frame animation? And that's a really good question, and it really depends a lot on your style and what you want to accomplish with your animation. I'd say with motion tweens, since it looks really computery and really smooth, it can be really good for subtle things. Like you could use it for if your character's like standing still and breathing, like their chest is opening up, their arms kind of fall to the side. You could do really subtle stuff with motion tweens. Or you could, like I was showing earlier, just animate your whole character with motion tweens. There's really no one right answer to when you should use a motion tween and when you shouldn't. What else did people ask? Walk cycles. Walk cycles are a really good thing to go over. But before we go over walk cycles, I did want to show you guys a couple books that I would recommend picking up if you haven't already. So the first one Let me get my webcam, make sure I'm showing it to you. So the first one is Richard Williams' what's it called? Animator Survival Kit. That's probably the first one that people pick up, and it's really good because it goes over a lot of different subjects. It goes over walk cycles, sneak cycles, animating four-legged walks. This book is pretty much all walk cycles, so it's really good for starting out. I wouldn't actually recommend this book for walk cycles, though. The one I prefer to recommend is a cartoon animation by Preston Blair. This one actually has more realistic, I shouldn't say realistic, it has more accurate walk cycles. Like they'll actually in between and look nice, and they have the weight where they're supposed to. Whereas Richard Williams, the technique he uses, the head is at the lowest part on the down position, where normally your head is on the lowest part during your contact position. So just to demonstrate what that means, so there's two main walk cycle poses that I'll start out with when I'm planning a walk cycle. God, I hate drawing in Flash. It just makes a mess of your lines. So there's the contact, and then there's the passing position. And what the contact is when you're... And that's probably a little extreme. With animation, it's really easy to over-animate. And really with animation, you want to practice subtlety. Animating something that's over the top and really crazy and out there is really easy compared to animating something that's subtle and emotional. A really good example is like The Triplets of Belleville. Is a really good animated movie that uses a lot of subtlety and a lot of really subtle like facial expressions. But yeah, anyways, it's kind of off topic. So with contact, that's where this foot has met with the ground right here. And in the passing, contact is usually the lowest position for your torso and your hips. So when animating a walk cycle, everything comes from the hips. Not just with a walk cycle, but with a dance or with just a weight shift, shifting from one leg to the other. You animate from the hips. If you animate from the head down, your animation's going to look floaty and it'll look like there's no gravity to it. So a good tip I like to have in mind when I'm drawing and animating is to start with the hips. So that's why I'm just drawing the hips right now and not worrying about the body or anything. So the passing position, what it means is that this leg is passing through like this. So it's bent and it's up, and then this other leg is now straight up and down. And just to show you the difference between the two legs, I'm going to shade one. So this is his back leg. So contact and passing. So the way Preston Blair has his walk cycles, which I believe is the more correct way, is he has the contact being the most down position for the torso, the head, and everything, and the passing position being the most upwards for both your body and your head. Dude, Cal, I still shitpost on Newgrounds. I've been uploading some crap on there every once in a while. So let's actually animate a walk cycle. And I'll show you just how I do this from start to finish. So first off, you have to consider your floor. So I put in a guide for the front leg, and then I put in a guide for the back leg. Since we're working in 3D space, even though we're drawing 2D animation, you should still consider what the perspective is going to be. So you can either do like a 1-point perspective grid like this, or the way I prefer to do it is have 2-point perspective. God, this is bad. All right, forget the perspective. I'm just gonna really go through this as quick as I can. So we have a guide on the bottom and a guide a little further back for his back leg. And I'll call this guide. And then if I right click and select guide, you'll see the movie file. This guide layer is not going to export with it. So it's purely just for my reference. And then here, we're going to have the rough sketch of the walk cycle. So usually when I'm starting out, I like to work with like sort of a red color, just because traditionally that's what rough animations are done with, is like a red pencil. And I'll start with the contact position. So let's just do a quick little bean body. So a good tip for drawing bodies and heads is everything's a bean. So see how this is kind of like a pear shape, and this is sort of like, I don't know, like a lima bean shape? Everything's a bean. Everything you draw should be a bean. Not really, but it's just the way I kind of think about drawing cartoons. It gives it an appealing shape, and it's actually anatomically pretty correct. If I were to put a rib cage and my hips in here, I mean, even on our real bodies, this is what it looks like. So the jelly bean kind of look to it still comes from real life. So for the contact, I have this leg back here just starting to bend up like that. And then for his back leg, the one furthest away from us, we have it just contacting the ground. Just like that. And then on the contact position, so we'll just write this out for clarity. Remember, it's our down position. And then we'll shade this leg like so. So that's our down position. And the thing to remember with walk cycles is when this leg is back, when his leg closest to us is back, that means this arm is going to be in front. Or it's going to be swinging the opposite direction, I should say, of the side of the leg that it's attached to. So this leg is going back, and this arm is going forwards. Same with here. His back leg is in the front, so his back arm should be back here. So the arms are always opposite what the legs are doing when you're creating a walk cycle. And then we insert a blank keyframe, extend our guide layer so we can see. And then this leg is going to be coming back, right? So we want that one to be right here about in the middle. And this one's going to be our passing position that we were talking about. So his body's going to be further up than his contact position because, you know, his leg is straight, which raises his hips, which raises his body. And then this other leg is passing in front, which is why we call it the passing position. We could probably bring that up a little bit more, just to emphasize that squash and stretch. So you can think of the contact position as like the squash, and then the passing position. Yeah, Radioactive Animator. I am recording this, and we'll be posting it to YouTube. Possibly heavily edited. But yeah, I will be posting this to YouTube. So if you go to my YouTube, feel free to subscribe, and you should see it up there shortly. Brandon can draw. Usually for the onion skin, I was saying earlier that I usually have not been using that because this is more a traditional way to animate. The onion skin can become kind of a crutch that you're using. You know, you can end up not pushing things as far because of the onion skin. So you just get more of a sense of motion if you flip back and forth like this, like I'm doing now. I can see how much squash and stretch is really going on. Whereas if you have the onion skin, you kind of just... Yeah, I can't really explain it other than it just looks better. Gosh darn it, it just looks better. Yeah, so it'll be in my past broadcasts probably, but I'll put up a more clean version of this on YouTube. Semi-clean. I'll just put like a title on it or something. Cut out all the BS. All the long awkward pauses. As an animator, I tend not to be the most social or the most easy to talk to person. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of awkward moments for us to share. So anyways, now that we've got our contact and our passing position, we need not just these two, right? There's two steps that need to happen. There's a step with the left foot and a step with the right foot. So we can actually copy these keyframes and paste them. Oops. Copy these keyframes and paste them? Why is that not working? Copy frames. Paste frames. So yeah, copy frames, paste frames, and then all we have to do is just switch our hands on our legs. And let's lock our guide so we don't accidentally erase the guide. So we just switch out our legs. So this leg's going to be going in front, just making contact with the ground like we were talking about earlier. And then this one is going to be in the back, just starting to come up. So his foot's a bit bent, just like so. Right? Is that right? Yep, that's right. So this one's shaded because it's in the back. And then like we were saying before, this leg's in the back, so this arm has to be in the front. And then same here, this leg is in front, so that means this arm is in the back. Alright, so now we have our main poses. These are the ones I'll spend the most time on, just making sure they look right and, you know, it's looking the way I want it to, because these are kind of our golden poses that we're going to be using. So F5 increases the exposure for each one of these drawings so they last a bit longer. So for timing an animation out, one thing you can do in Flash that I use a lot is I'll have a square here, like so, and I'll call that square front foot, and I'll make another square with a different color, like this, and I make it about the size of his foot, and you'll see why in a minute. And I'll call that back foot. So let's create motion tweens with these. So I'm creating classic tween on both of these, so it converts those rectangles to symbols. And then what we want to do is we want to reverse them. So this is our other contact position. So I move his back foot rectangle back here, and I move his front rectangle up to where his front foot is, like so. And then same going back. Oops. Same going back. So we have our rectangles going back and forwards. And the reason this is useful is because when you're putting in your in-betweens, so let's just extend this so we have some room to draw in between these keyframes. So these rectangles are useful because when I put in a keyframe here for his down position, or I think of this as the weight position. So this is where he's going to be placing his weight on this front foot here. And this foot's going to get lifted off the ground. So when we're moving our hips, how to explain this? So he's putting his weight on his front foot so that he can take his back leg up. So what he needs to do is he has to have his hip closer to this leg than back here. So just to show you what that looks like. And since we created these rectangles, I know that his back leg needs to be exactly right here, where this blue rectangle is. And then this foot is going to be right exactly here. And it's starting to come up off the ground, so it looks like that. It's kind of dragging behind. See that drag that I'm putting in there? So his toes are dragging behind, and his ankle's coming up this way. And then this foot, since there's weight on it, it's going to be bent like so. But let's figure out where his hips need to be. So his hips need to be right about here. I think that might work. A lot of animation is trial and error. You know, you rough the stuff out and it doesn't work, so you keep trying. It's usually not a good idea to settle on the first drawing that you do. You want to keep working at it until the drawing looks the way you want it to look, or the way the movement is moving the way you want it to move. I'm not doing that here just because I want to show you guys just some techniques and examples and stuff, so this stuff's looking pretty crude, but hopefully it's helpful and hopefully you're getting an idea of how to animate this stuff. So with the weight, his arm's going to start coming back the other way. So a bit like a pendulum. It's going to start coming back. And in this case, I might use the onion skin just because I want to see where that hand needs to be. So a technique that I use a lot is to draw the hand first. Just figure out where the hand is supposed to go. So just figure out where that hand needs to be. Same for this backhand. Figure out those hands, and then just attach an arm on there. Just put an arm on there. Thanks, Radioactive Animator. Thanks for stopping by. Hope to see you in future broadcasts. I want to get better at this streaming thing. I mean, I'm pretty new at it, so I don't quite know what I'm doing as far as like structure. And truth be told, I didn't put a lot of structure into this. I wanted it to be pretty interactive and just kind of make it free-flowing. Usually with my workshops, I'll spend quite a bit of time rehearsing and figuring out the course material and stuff. So there's his weight position. And then we're going to in-between into his passing position. So let's insert a blank keyframe using F7. And then for here, I'll probably use the onion skin just because I want to make sure to get a good looking in-between, or at least the start of it. You know, I want to draw the big masses. So with drawing, you always want to go from big to small. You start from the big drawings, like the head and torso. So really for moving a character around, if you're doing like a complex movement, this is all you need. Just a circle and a bean. So if you can get this circle and bean moving around where you want it to go, then you can add the legs onto it afterwards. And the arms. And then, as soon as you get into the detail, maybe the face. But until you get this part solid, until you get these two shapes working the way you want it to go, then you can start working into the details. That's helped me a lot for animating animals, like animals with 4 legs and such. Because animating 4 legs is tough. It's a lot to keep track of. So if you animate the torso first, it makes it a lot easier to add in the legs afterwards. So just something that I found helps me. So this is just a regular in-between. This is where he's gonna start to land his foot on the ground. And since we have our handy dandy rectangles, I know his foot needs to be right about there. Oh god. This is probably one of the worst walk cycles I've ever done. But hopefully you guys are getting the idea. Oh, the trick to animate spiders is you animate the 2 front legs, and then you copy and paste, and then offset. So with the spider, you know, this one's forward and this one's backwards. You animate those 2 legs, then you copy and paste it in the back and just offset it. So this one's forward, this one's back, and then this one is forward, and this one's back. And then the more legs there are, the more you just copy and paste. And then you just offset it. So no matter how many legs with a centipede or a spider, that's just a quick, easy way to copy and paste animation so you don't have to kill yourself. Oh, if it's 9 legs, I don't know. He drags the 9th one behind him. Oh, hey, Eric. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks, man. This walk cycle needs a little help, but hopefully it's giving people an idea. So this is right before his foot starts to land. And also in betweening where his arm needs to go. So yeah, that's one step. So I'm not going to do the other step. Just because I'm lazy and I want to move on to something else. But yeah, so one step involves a contact position, his weight position, where he's putting weight onto his leg. Then a passing position, where this leg is passing in front. And this weight position, ignore this drawing. It's pretty bad. I probably needed to go a lot more subtle with it. Have his body up here instead. But the thing to remember about the weight position is this leg is bent and this one's coming off the ground. Those are the important parts. Just focus on that part of the drawing. So his weight position then moves into the passing position, which is where our torso and our head are at their peak. And then, I don't know what you'd call this one. In between something. It's right before he sets his foot down for the contact position. So, yeah. When I was doing walk cycles in college, I would cheat and I would copy and paste this one step. I'd be like, God, I got one step done. Now I just copy these drawings and just switch the legs. And that doesn't really work. It looks like they're just walking to one side. There's no back and forth to their walk. So it looks very unnatural. Just something to keep in mind. Don't be lazy. Actually animate his hips moving from forwards to backwards. So like that. And then on the other step, his hips would be facing this way. Like so. So that way we get nice rotation going. Alright, so that's kind of just an overview of walk cycles and stuff. What else did people ask? Sam asks, I'd be interested to know when and where the appropriate times to use tweening in Flash for character animation. Any tips on how to create good key poses? Okay, so this is a fun one. I like creating poses. And there's a lot of stuff to go on about, but the essential thing with a pose, and watch as I magically butcher the spelling of this word, is the silhouette. I'm going to put a spelling error zigzag under there. So the silhouette, if you were to take your pose and turn it completely black, would you still be able to see what the character's doing? That's a super important part of animating. So if I were to fill in my character and he looks like this, you know, what the hell is he doing? Whereas if I were to block in my silhouette and it were to look more like this, you know, clearly you can tell what's going on. And a strong silhouette shouldn't just be prevalent in the key poses, it should be prevalent in the in-betweens too. So as much as you can, make sure your silhouettes are really strong and they have these good spaces of negative space in between so you can see what's going on. And another thing when doing a pose is to consider balance. So if a character is standing still, you know, it's pretty easy to keep them balanced because they're equally balanced on both feet. So just straight up and down, no problem. But what if you want your character to move off to the side, maybe to reach for something or to shift his weight? The way to consider where his center of balance is going to be is in the pit of your collarbone. So if you notice this little pit right here, that's where the center of gravity is going to be. So if my character is leaning over this way, his center of gravity is over here. So if I were to place his legs way over here, you know, he's going to fall down. There's no way for him to support himself. So we need to have some way to have his center of balance be supported. So, and in a walk cycle, or if for any movement, this balance will be off balance for a little bit, right? Until you catch yourself with your other leg. So, with a walk cycle, oftentimes, depending on how determined your character is or what attitude they have, their center of balance is going to be a little bit forward. So they're always falling and catching themselves when they walk. And of course, with a good key pose, you want to have a line of action. So oftentimes, but not always, this line is where the spine is going to be, or where his back is going to be. So if the character is happy and joyous, they're going to be like, yippee! Right? And they're going to be following that line of action. Or with a more subtle example, if you draw someone just standing, and you use a line of action like that, just straight up and down, oh, put me to sleep. Oh, it's so boring. Look how boring it is. Standing, you could have them say slouching like this. So maybe their head's ducked down and their shoulders are up and they're kind of just mopey and, you know, not feeling so well. So even in a stand, you could have some really interesting subtleties going on just from using this line of action principle. And you can be as subtle with it or as extreme with it as you want. So I could take the same example, bend it the other way, and have them standing, you know, pretty proud of themselves. You know, maybe their arms are on their hips in sort of a Superman stance. Maybe their legs are a little bit farther out. Like so. So yeah, even with a standing position, you can use this line of action to really create some really nice acting in your poses. You want to make sure to lock down your... Flash is notorious for taking a nice smooth line and then putting it through a blender. So if we zoom in here, you can see it puts in these weird corners and stuff, and it just generally looks awful. So this is the main reason I switched over to Toon Boom. Drawing in Toon Boom is so much nicer than drawing in Flash, but you have options called Lazy Nezumi, and it's really cheap. If you're a student, getting a license for it is only like 25 bucks or so, and you can get a free trial of it. So what it does, I'll show you here. So it's got all these options for different kinds of smoothing, and it also has these options for giving you a fuzzy line, which I don't really use. But yeah, in Flash you can put the smoothing to massive, and then the way it works is it hooks on to whatever window you're drawing in. So we go to File, Hook Window, and after clicking OK, place your mouse cursor inside the window and wait 3 seconds. So press OK. I'll put it into Flash. Wait a little bit. You'll see it flash, and it says Window Hooked. So now, if I draw in Flash, you can see it's dragging along my line, giving me a smoother looking line. So you can see a little, it's called a, what do they call it? They call it like a pulled string sort of look to it. So when you're inking or coloring in your character, it can help smooth out your lines. I mean, Flash still butchers it a little bit, like here. But yeah, it should help. It's called Lazy Nezumi. So it's a nice little program that I like to suggest to people that are frustrated with how Flash deals with artwork and stuff. And that's the reason I do all my rough animations in the pencil tool. You know, oops, let me turn Lazy Nezumi off because I don't need it. So I do all my rough animating with the pencil tool usually, just because it's easier and it seems to work a bit faster too. There's not as much lag to it. Hey, Retro Zombie. Thank you for joining. If you have any questions about Flash, I'd love to, discuss what I know. I've been kind of just freestyling topics and just going over random things. Um, Usually causes Flash CS3 to crash for me, Lazy Nizumi. That's too bad. That really sucks. Um, Maybe try using like Flash 8 or something. Maybe that would work a little bit better. Yeah, Flash is terrible for drawing in. I have seen Cuphead. I've been following that project for a long time because I really like the old Fleischer cartoons, like the old Popeye cartoons. Those are some of my favorites. I'd have to say Popeye's like my favorite cartoon character of all time. So yeah, Cuphead is a game that's like designed in that old 1930s Betty Boop sort of animation style. And it looks really cool. Yeah, so I've been following it for a while. And it looks pretty awesome. So one thing, I like to use arms when I demonstrate a lot of animation things, just because you could show a lot of principles with an arm animation. I mean, you can demonstrate arcs. You can demonstrate drag. God, I hate... Have I said that I don't like drawing in Flash? Especially handwriting. For some reason, just writing out notes is the worst. So, you can demonstrate arcs, drag, what else? Anticipation, and overshooting. So, if you were to give someone an arm like this and told them to in between it, probably what they would do is they'd insert a blank keyframe in between, turn on their onion skin, and then say, okay, we have a hand here and a hand here. So the hand needs to go about here, and it needs to in between kind of like that. So that's what a beginner would probably in between if you were to give them these two poses. If you were to draw a pendulum on one side and then a pendulum on the other, this is the same as the in-betweener saying, okay, there's a pendulum here and here, so the in-between needs to go here. No. What happens is the string is shrinking, and it also is not a very appealing movement because it's just moving along a straight line. It just doesn't look nice. And this is not how things move in nature. Things move along arcs. And to kind of show you a demonstration of this, is there's these really cool statues, and I don't know the artist that does them. Let's see if I can look them up. Oh gosh darn. I should have looked it up earlier. But there's these really cool statues that show like ballerinas or baseball pitchers throwing a ball or like dancing. And you can see their hands are moving in these really pretty arcs. And a lot of like figure eight sort of style movements with their hands and their feet and their facial expressions. So when you're animating things, you want to make sure that everything's moving on an arc. And I literally mean everything. I had an animator supervisor who is a really great teacher, and he was looking at a character talking, and I had like the open mouth like this, and then a mouth like this, you know? And this was in 3D, but the principle still applies. And then the in-between, it would just be like straight lip corner in between sort of thing. And he'd be like, no, make sure everything goes on an arc, even the corners of your lips. You know, you want to make sure they move along these arcs, because they do. That's the natural way that things like that move. If your character's looking up and then looking in a different position, like looking down, all of these facial features need to move along an arc. So his nose is going to move on an arc. His mouth is going to move on an arc. Each eyeball is going to move on an arc. And even his whole head, like his whole skull, is going to move along that arc. So back to our hand example. The in-betweener just moved it straight from the first hand to the second hand in a very linear fashion. So instead, when you're doing your in-betweens, sketch out where that arc is going to go. And then, like I was saying earlier, plan out where the hand goes. Draw the hand first, and then just attach an arm to it. You know, you don't need to worry so much behind your arm. Your arm is leading the way, and then your hand kind of follows behind it. And then for an anticipation, anticipation is just when motion moves in the opposite direction before it moves forward. So if a character is walking, or wants to walk in a certain direction, before they can move forward, like so, he needs to move back a little bit. So for our hand example, we have our hand moving forward. So before he does the slap motion, we want to move our hand backwards a little bit. And remember keeping those arcs, so even the anticipation is moving on an arc in the back. So we anticipate a little bit. It's actually not a very good arc. I'm trying to teach this stuff and doing terrible. So he anticipates a little bit. I swear, when I try to show other people how to animate, it's always when I do my worst animation. Every time. Every single time. So then I'm adjusting the arc on this hand, like that. And then for the... when he hits the table, we want to do an overshoot. So I want to make sure to get like a big squash on there. So his hand squashes and then pops back up. So this is a pretty bad example that I've drawn, but hopefully the concepts are clear, and yeah, hopefully you understand what I mean by all this gobbledygook. What else have people asked? How to manage a large-scale project. How to insert special effects. Not necessarily in Flash, though. I don't know if we have time for special effects, but I'll show you how I would plan a big, long project for animation. So what I use is Google Drive. And Google Drive is cool because it shares it to the cloud, so you can access it anywhere and even share it with other animators if they're working on it with you. So Defbox, thanks for joining. So we were using Adobe Flash to animate, and if you look down at the bottom, I think I put a quick list of all the tools that I'm using, including the tablet that I'm using to draw on. Oh yeah, Retro Zombie, the timing on animation book is really good. I actually don't have that one. I need to pick it up, but I've borrowed it from the library. It was awesome. But anyways, For planning a big project, what I'll do is I'll make a spreadsheet. And this is how I would split up any project I worked on. Whether it's a freelance project or a personal project, this is how I would do it. So I give the title of the project up here, and then I set my categories. So in here we have multiple episodes. So I put episode 1, 2, 3, and then the big one, the Christmas special, coming up. It's got 8 whole scenes. And then, I'll number the scenes accordingly and how many frames they are. So I kind of can see at a glance which scenes are the behemoths. For example, scene 5 on the Christmas special is 1065 frames. So I know that one's going to take me the longest to do. And then I'll have the categories of background. And you could put in something like rough if you're still working on it. Or if it's done, if any of these are done, I'll just put an X. So just like that. So if I have the backgrounds done for all of these, I'll just put X's. If I have another animator working with me, I'll just put their name right here. And then because I'm sharing this Excel sheet with them, they can see their name where they're supposed to be working. So for right now, Buddy is working on the background for scene 3, episode 2. And then once he's done with that, I'll cut his name, Control X, and then paste it on, maybe he's doing the storyboard over here. So I cut and paste his name over here for what he's working on. That way we don't work on the same things at the same time, which is super important. Oh yeah, this Reddit is awesome. No Stylin does a really good job of moderating it and stuff. He's a really nice guy. So anyways, background, that's kind of obvious. I mean, it's what the character is animated on. And I really suggest having like a black and white background or just a really sketchy background, especially if the character is going to be interacting with something like on a counter or sitting on a chair. You'll want to make sure to have your background at least roughed in first. It doesn't have to be for every scene, just for the ones where it matters having a background. Storyboard, that's where you could also call this layout, is probably the way I would probably name it actually. So there's no animation involved. This is just when you're putting in your key poses. So I would have like character 1 would be over here. And then he'd be all puzzled about something. And then character 2, way in the background, he's all puzzled too. So this is a layout drawing. So it just gives you an example of what the composition is going to look like and where the animation needs to happen. So once the layouts are done, then I will move on to rough. So like I was showing you before with the pencil tool, I'll just rough in animation as fast as I can. Just focusing on the key poses. Really, at the rough stage, that's all it is just key poses. Maybe a couple breakdown poses, just so you can get an idea of really complex movement. Then, after I'm done with the rough animation, I'll go on to first pass, which is kind of a more refined animation. I'll do more in-betweens. I'll flesh out the really complex animations. And then after that, I don't always do second pass, especially if it's like a pretty low-paying project. I'll usually skip this step, but if it's a pretty important project or a personal project, second pass is really just for getting everything on model, making sure the character looks right and the lines are clean. So when I go into cleanup stage, which is just cleaning up all your rough animation with the final pencil line, yeah, doing a second pass just helps with that, so you can go into cleanup pretty easily and just crank through it. And then I'll color it. Obvious enough, just color all the animation, do any shading you need to do, and then compositing. So I almost always take my animation layers and backgrounds into After Effects, and I'll composite them together, and I'll add special effects or like lighting tweaks or color changes. And I'll do all that in After Effects. And then once that scene is done, I export it. Oh, and that's the best part. And then once you have all these things done on that scene, feel free to highlight all those layers and just change the color to black. You don't have to worry about it anymore. And, excuse me. And once all these are all blacked out, oh, it's a good feeling. So just any way to keep track and check stuff off. Checking stuff off is really important. It's the best feeling you can have when you're working on a big animation. Welcome, Naughty Panda. We're actually just wrapping up here. I was only going to do for an hour. But, excuse me. But yeah. I'll be uploading this to YouTube, so it's probably going to be really embarrassing for me. But yeah, I'm going to be uploading this to YouTube, so you can check out all the stuff that we went over. We went over... what all did we do? Sort of my process of animating in Flash. I started this thing and never finished it. How to get smooth lines in Flash. What else did we go over? I have my notes here. Oh yeah, how to do motion tweens. We went over that. How to manage a project. We didn't get to special effects. But I'd like to do these again. I really like putting on these things, and I want to get better at it. I mean, I know I'm not the best at these things, but I want to get better. You know, I like teaching people, and I feel like once I get better at the talky part, then I can be better at the teachy part. But, yeah. That's pretty much everything I wanted to go over. I'll just leave this quote up here to inspire you guys. Ollie Johnston, you're not supposed to animate drawings, you're supposed to animate feelings. So yeah, thank you guys for attending. If you have any feedback or comments or questions, I'll be in the Twitch chat for a while, just answering questions you may have. Yeah, this was a lot of fun, and thank you guys so much for showing up. I have a donate button at the bottom. I absolutely do these for fun. I don't expect any donations, but if you want to help me out and encourage me to do more of these things, it would help me out so much. So thank you guys for attending. Yeah, let's hang out again. All right, take care, guys.